Hi, it's Dave T here, and today I will be putting together a multi-camera video system using the Blackmagic ATEM Mini specifically for a music tutor that is now having to give tuition online via Zoom. Now at the heart of this system is going to be the Blackmagic ATEM Mini, which is priced at just over £330 in the UK at the moment and has 4 HDMI inputs which connects to a PC or laptop via USB just like a webcam. Now there are two main reasons for using the ATEM Mini. Firstly, it provides a simple to use button-based interface to switch between cameras to give the students multiple camera angles. Now this is really important for music tutors who have to operate both the technology side of an online tuition and of course the actual teaching itself. The second advantage of the ATEM is that it enables you to use standard video cameras ranging from a basic small camera all the way up to a much more expensive DSLR and mirrorless cameras such as the Canon EOS R that I'm filming this on right now. All of that means you can get a much higher quality image than you would do out of a standard webcam. Now when teaching music there are always going to be instruments, music stands and other paraphernalia getting in the way, so I'm intending to mount as much of this setup onto a portable stand as possible. This should save on floor space and also keep cabling much more organised, which will be important as and when tutors start to transition back to normal where they are likely to be giving a mixture of online and in-person lessons, so need to keep changing the setup. This setup will use a laptop to run the video conferencing software, an external microphone for audio and an external monitor for improved screen sharing. I'll be connecting 2 cameras initially, but will add 2 friction arms to the trolley in preparation for a 3rd camera later. So to get started, I'm going to first assemble the laptop stand. So now we've actually got the stand built, I can start to see where we're actually going to put things. In terms of the camera mounts, now we've got the laptop on top, what I intend to do is mount a camera just poking, I'm not sure if you can see my hand there, just poking over the top of the laptop here, so almost exactly where the normal laptop camera is built in. So to do that, I was thinking I was going to have to drill into the top shelf, but actually there's already some screws here, so I'm just going to get a piece of wood. I've shaped it around the corners a bit. I'll paint this later on, and that will go, let's close this down, that will go at the back here. And what that's going to do is enable me to attach something like a friction arm, which will then have the camera on top. And these are quite good, they're quite cheap, it's only about 14-15 quid for that, but not really something you want to adapt on the fly because you need to loosen it, put it where you want the camera to be sighted and then tighten it back up again. So I've also got a kind of flexible swan neck, and I will probably try and mount that on top here for the secondary camera, but the camera that's going in the center as the main camera for the actual kind of face shot, if you like, that can go on a friction arm because once it's positioned, that's not likely to change apart from possibly zooming in and out. So next thing to do then is to fix this to the top and start mounting the arms. Okay, so now basically we've got this extra piece of wood along the back here. That's giving us a little bit of extra height, but also means I can basically screw and bolt whatever I like into here without actually having to damage the original stand. And then we have this camera on the friction arm directly above, more or less the same position as you would have your existing laptop camera. Certainly can be moved around on the friction arm. And then we've got this additional swan neck here, which we can put a ball joint on the top and mount a camera later when we get the third camera. So now we've got the basic mechanics done. Next stage is to do all of the power and cabling. Now it's worth pointing out that you can use the ATEM Mini pretty much out of the box without having to install any drivers, but by downloading and installing the drivers, and especially the ATEM control software, we can make some minor configuration changes which will really improve certain features. Now it's worth mentioning here, as part of their environmental policy, Blackmagic do not ship any software in the box. Instead they put a slip of paper asking you to download the software. Now this is great for saving plastic, etc. And since the software gets regularly updated, it's better to download the latest version anyway. You need to go to blackmagicdesign.com and then click on support. Or you can just go straight to blackmagicdesign.com/support. Then in the top section of the page, click ATEM Live Production Switches. Not much will appear to happen, but the items in the 3 columns further down the page will actually swap to just show the items related to the switches. What's slightly confusing is that you use the same software for all of the switches, so you don't need to specifically look for the ATEM Mini. The latest driver should be at the top left hand side and be called something like ATEM Switches 8.4 Update. Download this version, install it, and then we can look at the actual configuration software. Zoom opened up and I'm going to go to the settings in Zoom, go to video, and we've got our inbuilt laptop camera, and I'm going to go to the Blackmagic design. So that should appear just the same as any other webcam that you plugged in, at which point we now get the input from camera 1. This is what will be sent to Zoom and it's coming through the Blackmagic. Okay. Now one important thing is make sure you enable HD, so that's a zoom setting to make sure it makes full use of the camera's resolution. So that's all basically set in terms of zoom, and on the actual Blackmagic now, I've only got one camera installed, but I have done something which could be quite useful for people doing tutors. So if I press button 4 on the Blackmagic and it will fade out, we've got picture in picture turned on, so you now see camera 1 but it's showing up the top corner of the screen. Okay, but also we're seeing what looks like a Windows desktop. Okay, now this is a Windows desktop and it's actually a Windows desktop of the laptop I'm using, and what I've basically done is I plugged an HDMI cable into the laptop's output, but instead of plugging it into a screen, I've then plugged it into the Blackmagic. So now we're seeing, and we would be presenting over Zoom, the second screen of the laptop. So I can demonstrate this by for example, opening up, let's say, Word, and now I've got Word, I'm going to actually put Word over on the second screen. You can see how as I move it over, it's going onto the second screen there. I have actually got another screen plugged into the output of the Blackmagic, because the Blackmagic won't just present to the laptop over USB, it will also send an HDMI output to a monitor. I've got another screen beside me which will be showing the output for the Blackmagic. So, and because I can then use that as the second screen of the laptop, I can then have, for example, a Word document, a PDF, something like that, full screen there. And now when I go between 4 and 1, so I'm on camera 1 now, I'll turn that picture in picture off. So I'm camera 1, and when I go to camera 4, it effectively shows the second screen. So I can have a PDF of some music, for example, that I want to show to this student. And if I want to keep talking to the student while I'm doing that, obviously I've got picture in picture at the same time. And I can use my mouse cursor over on the second screen to do things on the other screen, for example, point to the music. Okay, so we're using the Blackmagic not just for sharing cameras, but we're using it to share any HDMI output source. So the next thing we want to do is look at the actual settings for the Blackmagic. Now I'm going to leave zoom up here purely because it's a convenient way on the screen capture of seeing what the student's going to see. If I go to the start, because we've done that install and then scroll down, we have a folder for Blackmagic Design and we're looking for the ATEM software control. It comes up and says switch not connected straight away and then it finds it, so don't panic about that. Okay, so we can actually use this to control it, but the whole point of having the Blackmagic is that it's buttons, so when you're actually doing a tuition or something like that, you can just hit the buttons and swap around, and it's not going to be confusing for someone that's not doing this all of the time. But what this does allow you to do in the software control is make various adjustments to the standard settings. So for example, what I can do is I can look at the upstream key, and this is for the picture in picture. So if I turn the picture in picture on, now there's various people who have kind of complained about this because basically with the picture in picture, as soon as you press one of the picture in picture buttons, I don't know if you noticed there, but it's moving between the top left and right corners as I press the buttons on the Blackmagic. But what it's doing is it's setting to the default size, which is quite small. But what you can do is this trick. So basically what we can do is we can say camera 1's the default source, and then we can, in the size, so let's say we're going to have it 0.5. Okay, and now we can move it across. So now it's taking almost a quarter of the screen. Now that may be too big for you, so you can obviously adjust it to what you want. But now we've got that set. However, if I'm not going to touch it, but if I touch any of the buttons on the Blackmagic, it's going to reset that. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, now that I've adjusted it to that size, I'm going to save the startup state. Now what this means is every time the Blackmagic turns on, that's what it's going to default to. Now if whilst doing tutoring I can turn it, if I press the buttons, if I turn it off and on again, that's going to be fine. It's going to just use that size, the larger size that we've set up, and it's going to use that positioning we've set up. If, however, I touch the top left, top right, and so on, then you see how it reverts back to that smaller size. To avoid that, what I'm going to do is just get half of, if you know the SD card cases, I'm going to get one of those, cut it in half, put a bit of tape and put that over the top of those panels so that Louise doesn't accidentally press those during tuition. Now if she does, it's not a problem. Next time she turns the Blackmagic off and on again, it will go back to the correct settings. But that's just a convenient way of getting a picture-in-picture to the size you want it. So that's the first kind of change we're going to make. Okay, so I'm going to just revert back to those. 2 seconds. Okay, so next thing I'm going to do is look at sound, because if you have seen any reviews of the Blackmagic ATEM Mini, then one thing that keeps cropping up is about the audio delay. However, if it's an early review, that's because they're talking about it because they hadn't fixed it then, but they have got a fix for it now. It won't happen if you're just using the microphone on the camera, but if you find you're using an external microphone, like we're going to be here going into one of the microphone inputs, you'll find that it won't necessarily be in time or in sync with the video, and it could just be 1 or 2 frames, it could be 6 or 7 frames out. So what you could find is if you kind of clap like that, you'll get a different, ever so slightly different gap between the actual hit visually and the sound that you hear. That's because HDMI has to encode it, so it's always going to take a few milliseconds or a few fractions of a second before the video and audio signal comes in over HDMI. And if you then have a line signal coming straight in from a microphone, then that's going to hit the ATEM first. Okay, so what you can do is you can delay the audio to bring it back in time. So the way to do this is you go to the audio settings, and then you've got the audio inputs for your 4 cameras and also your 2 microphones. Now what you can do is, this one down here is not particularly obvious, that little kind of arrow pointing to a 0. You can actually then set the delay factor. Just hold the mouse on it and go left and right, and you see it's delaying by frames. Okay, so it's not in milliseconds or something, it's in the number of frames, because the video signal will be either in time or behind the audio signal by a certain number of frames. So what you can do is you can adjust that, and basically it's just a question of trying it and seeing which is better, just doing a clap test and seeing if the clap is heard at the same time as you see it. Okay, so if you are getting a delay like that, then you can go in here, adjust this delay. Actually, with our cameras and stuff, it doesn't seem to be a problem, but you might find it with certain cameras you have more of an issue. So you can set a delay there, and again, once you've set that delay, I'm not going to change this one because I don't need to. Again, you want to go and save that as a startup state, and ideally, so that you've got a backup, save it, the settings file on the actual PC, so you've got a copy on the PC as well if you need to. Okay, so whilst we're talking about audio, it's worth bearing in mind that here you do have all sorts of settings for the audio that you can adjust in terms of both the levels and a certain amount of equalizing and so on. Now I'm not going to go into that now. There's various videos. I'll put a link to an audio engineer that's done a really good video on that subject. But if you find you do need to actually EQ some of the mics to change it, then you can do that, and again EQ it in here and then save it as your startup. So thank you for sticking with this somewhat longer than expected video. Yesterday I actually managed to install the ATEM Mini setup in Louise's studio, and I think you'll agree it has certainly given her a tidier arrangement. There's more room for her to access the piano, and it should be much easier to move when she is able to provide in-person tuition. The overhead camera is a Canon HF-R806, which is lightweight, gives a clean HDMI output, and actually comes complete with a direct power supply for continuous operation. I fixed a standard 25mm close rail to the ceiling with brackets, and this is more than ample for the weight of any cameras that Louise is likely to fix there. But please check if you're planning to mount heavier cameras or lights, and always tether them directly to the pole for safety. Now the Canon M200 is a more superior camera, but does suffer from displaying the autofocus square on the HDMI output at all times. We're looking at resolving this, but the M200 was mainly purchased because it was the lowest cost option, which used the Canon EOS webcam utility when other devices such as the ATEM were in short supply. So far, Louise has reported that her students are impressed with both the image quality and also the ability to have picture-in-picture. Being able to switch between cameras, as you can see, is much simpler whilst teaching or even actually playing the piano. We did hit one minor issue with the external microphone, which was that the Yeti Blue microphone that Louise already had requires a USB connection to the computer to work at all. And this then caused some kind of electronic interference when using the 3.5mm line out going into the ATEM Mini. Other microphones worked fine, and I'm sure we'll find a solution to this, but in the meantime it's worth noting that by using the ATEM we had the option of using either the camera microphones or the USB microphones, and this gives a level of redundancy that's always good to have in a professional setting. I hope you have found this useful video, and if you have, then please hit that like button, and if you're interested in seeing other videos I make, then please consider subscribing to my channel. But most of all, thanks for watching.